There's a saying that goes round the American left wing of politics that reads, "If liberals won't enforce borders, fascists will." This seems to be something that our political mainstream in the UK are very slowly waking up to.
Our immigration policy is a complete disaster. We can both celebrate the contribution of immigrants and point out that something very strange is happening. We've gone from a situation where for nearly 50 years, the numbers were under 100,000, and we've just jumped in 5 years to 700,000, almost a million. There's absolutely no reason for that, and one of the biggest problems that we're not talking about is only a third of those visas are for work. 2/3 of people are coming on student visas, family visas, or they're coming in for refugee and asylum status. And we have to deal with this because the thing that's driving far-right groups all the way across Europe, undermining democracy, is the perception that we don't have control of immigration. So we can be humane, we can be liberal, we can be welcoming, we can say that immigration is vital for our economy, but we have to demonstrate that we have a working system. And the Conservatives failed, and I fear Labour's going to fail too.
Now, as regular viewers know, I cannot stand Rory Stewart. I think he symbolises everything wrong with the modern Conservative Party. He's a left-wing liberal pretending to be a Conservative, and it's especially galling to hear him talking like this about immigration when he's called anybody who's made those same points for the past couple of decades an evil, monstrous person who's not welcome in modern Britain. But let's break down what a weasel he really is. Firstly,
because the thing that's driving far-right groups all the way across Europe, undermining democracy, is the perception that we don't have control of immigration.
The perception you don't have control of immigration. We've just had figures stating you're letting in almost 1 million people a year. It's not a perception, it's a fact you've lost control of immigration. Secondly, why are far-right groups undermining democracy? They haven't had any power for decades. The people who've been in power are you, globalist liberals, who have undermined democracy by ignoring the will of the European peoples decade after decade and showering them with opprobrium if they speak out. But it's easy to forget when it comes to the globalist liberal types that democracy to them means what they want to happen. He also spoke in that clip about remaining humane regarding mass immigration. I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean not questioning the endless figures that keep coming here? And also, were the Southport stabbings humane? Were the grooming gangs humane? Have the terror attacks been humane? Is making British people a minority in their own country humane? None of this matters to someone like Rory Stewart because he's a progressive and he lives by progressive moral theology. That means in his ideology, the only victims are the people from the third world, people outside of white Western culture. Any of the problems we experience therein and talk about, he just sees as far-right talking points. These concerns were ignored for years and you were told you were mad and bad if you had them, and this was the fuel behind Brexit. Remember, during Brexit we were told that we would be able to take control of our borders and have control over immigration. Yet the elite liberals, the powers that be, took great offence to the British people voting for Brexit and decided to punish us heavily for it. As you can see from this absolutely shocking graph, when 2020 came around after Brexit and COVID, the government opened up our borders and let in almost 1 million people from outside of the EU. Now, the Labour Party types are trying to make out that this is just a result of Brexit. I think that's absolute nonsense. This has been done on purpose to punish the British people and push forward the globalist liberal project. I see it as them essentially saying to us, you can do nothing, and if you try, we'll double down on you. They also guarded this policy via a celebration of wokeness, something they're also now turning their backs on as they see the public ire is growing too strong.
The way that the word woke has been weaponized into this sort of right-wing and sometimes left-wing populist political campaigning is pretty disturbing.
One of the problems is that although foundationally the idea is to care for people and respect how they might describe themselves and fit into society, and there's been huge progress on the way that we think about diversity and vulnerable groups, it's also true that some of this has really alienated people, and some of it occasionally seems grotesque and absurd, which is why the far right is always able to exploit it.
So again, it's not that the aims of woke are grotesque and absurd. To Rory Stewart, the Conservative, they seem grotesque and absurd. To Rory, and I'm not too sure what face he's pulling in this clip, a man chopping his knackers off, white people being the progenitors of all evil around the world and throughout time, drag shows for kids, all of this seems grotesque. It's all just progress and normal, really, and your far right if you're against it. I mean, what is Rory Stewart actually trying to conserve? 2020 wokeism as opposed to 2024? It reminds me of someone like Dave Rubin, who's also a fake conservative.
David, my husband, who you know, he's a little younger than me. He grew up in a time where he just thought he was going to get married. It wasn't a thing. I'm a child of the 80s. It was gay marriage and whatever else, and I struggled with all that.
Yeah, that might be because gay marriage is a left-wing liberal thing, not a conservative thing.
And now I've got David, who I'm FaceTiming with every night, whatever country in, telling me he wants kids. And I've got you on stage telling 10,000 people every night why they should have kids.
He's talking to Jordan Peterson here, by the way, and he did get famous for his lectures on reawakening the Western tradition and meta-narrative in order to save the West. However, I didn't really take from those lectures that it's all about gay guys getting married and having kids, but it seems I might be wrong, as that sort of thing makes Jordan Peterson cry.
We've got two-year-olds now, and Justin's middle name is Jordan, which one of the great joys of my life was calling you up that day and asking you if we could do it, and we got the Jordan Peterson tears, which, we've gotten every now and again.
Oh yeah, gay guys getting married and fostering children, that's reawakening the conservative Christian tradition of the West. But look, I don't mean to be mean. I like Jordan Peterson, and Dave Rubin's alright too, but to be blunt, these two are liberals. If you're not going to defend the sanctity of the family as the core unit of Western culture, you're a liberal. You're not a conservative. It's not very complicated. But to be fair though, they're in a different universe compared to Rory Stewart. He's just an out-and-out leftist. It often makes me wonder, what do people like Rory Stewart think is going to happen in the future? I mean, does he really think that we just need to live in the atmosphere of Blairism eternally? This neoliberal economics, liberal social policy, as we let more and more people into England and the Western world, especially people like Muslims with hyper-conservative belief systems. Does he just think we're all just going to give up our belief systems and become happy-clappy liberals in a few years? The reality is that this is just madness. And as things get worse and worse, people are looking for their foundations and realising that in the liberal progressive world, there aren't any foundations. Now, because of this, people across the Western world are starting to hark back to the traditions that made them. They're searching for solid rock to build a life upon spiritually, collectively, and personally, and who can blame them? Because Rory Stewart is a sheltered liberal elite, he doesn't understand any of this. He just sees it all as far right. Of course, in his Hollywoodized version of the world, the far right just want to take advantage of present situations for their own gain. As the world falls apart, you start to see what's really real, and to me, liberalism isn't really real. It was just rooted in our economic success, a sense of cultural and ethnic homogeneity, and a quiet patriotism that allowed us to have a liberal society of quote-unquote freedoms. When things start falling apart, you see the real world is rooted in traditions, nations, peoples, and power systems. We've been sheltered from such harsh truths because of the success of Western culture and the blinding effects of liberalism. The rest of the world knows this. Look how the Chinese, the Russians, the Middle Easterners think. They see the Western world as a power system still. We may see it as universal liberal values, but they do not, because they are more in the real world than us a lot of the time. Now, because we've been so blinded to these harsh realities of life, we're going to have to reawaken to them, and that might be a painful process in my opinion. I personally think the future will see a lot of cultural and geographical reshaping as we figure out what the Western world is and what it's going to be into the future. If we don't do that, it will just get swallowed by globalist liberalism. These are just my thoughts, however. Do let me know what you think down below. Do consider subscribing to the channel.